26th. I get to be acting mayor this month, and Mayor Leonard, for some reason, I'm not sure, is unable to make it today.
Spring break.
Hopefully he'll be coming in and relieve me of this lovely post, but meanwhile, we'll get on with it. So first order of business, I want to acknowledge with gratitude that we live and work on the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. These people have been stewards of these lands and waters surrounding the Cumberland Island for millennia. Here we are. We have with us today. So my name's Judy Getty. I'm counselor for Bowen Island and Islands trustee, acting mayor today. And on my far right is
Sue Fast.
counselor and Islands trustee. And on my far left,
Councillor John Saunders.
and to his right,
Councillor Tim Lake.
and to his
Councillor
right,
Allison Morris.
staff here today. We've got a number of senior staff, but I'll start with our CAO. Karen, Dylan. And our corporate officer, Sophie Signa. We've got the director of environment and parks. And the director of,
Engineering and Public Works.
you're an engineer, but I didn't understand. We've got the finance officer. Okay. And anybody on Zoom? Yes, coming up.
On Zoom, we've got Councillor Alex Jurgensen.
Thank you, Alex. All right, so we've got three things on our agenda today, and we're going to start with yeah. So any additions or changes or any late items?
No late items.
Okay. Anything anybody wants to add or change? All right, then we'll accept approval of the agenda by consent. And we can make a public comments.
There are no public comments.
Yeah, not easy. Okay, no public comments then. Let's go directly to the delegations. So we've got Bob Turner, Dr. Wendy Palin, Dr. Tom Sisk, the Bowen Island Conservancy. So, an update on Carrick for Daily.
Okay.
So I'm going to start and then pass it over. Hello.
Hi, Bob.
Hello, Mayor and Council and everybody else. So I'm Bob Turner. I'm a member of the board of the Bowen Island Conservancy. I also act as the lead for the Conservancy's Caring for Nature initiative. And several years ago, the Conservancy confronted a perplexing problem. And that was that we knew from surveys by the Community Economic Development Committee, by the Community Foundation, and most recently by the OCP review, that islanders care deeply about the health of our nature. And that nature is tightly wound into our community identity. However, how do you turn those community values into effective action? That's the rub. And to date, the island's environmental protections have largely focused on streams, wetlands, and lakes through provincial regulations. The question is, what about the rest of the island? Now, the tricky bit is that nature is complex. How do you map nature's richness from place to place? How do you determine the importance of lands in terms of protection? And more particularly from the Conservancy's point of view, how do we empower the community with a bottom-up approach that provides credible scientific information that informs decision-making at all levels, from the property owner to community organizations like ourselves, to the municipality, to the province when it's dealing with its crown lands. So what did the Conservancy do? Well, we built a broad-based team that became over time the Caring for Nature initiative. And we established two priorities. And the first was really to engage and celebrate with the community our island's nature. And we've been doing that through an open house, booths at the farmers market in Beaufest, through a wildlife photo contest, a monthly series of articles in the Undercurrent. And most recently, we're working on essentially a backyard biodiversity handbook for residents to sort of promote biodiversity on their own home turf. A second priority has been really to build a scientific basis for informed decision-making. And that effort's been led by Dr. Phelan and Dr. Tom Sisk. They're both professional conservation biologists and both on faculty at the Department of Biological Sciences at Simon Fraser University. And so they have been sort of the leads on this whole enterprise through a process of the open house, community workshop, meetings with municipal planning staff, and the OCP steering committee. And so today's presentation really is wonderfully exciting for all of us because we've just released the draft biodiversity plan for Bowen Island, and you've all received copies of that. Now, as they're going to tell you, the report provides a scientific basis for assessing biodiversity values on Bowen. But it's more than that. It really invites a spirit of collaborative shared care for our island's nature. And really what we're hoping the outcome of this is that we empower all parts of the community, property owners, island organizations, the municipality, the province, to work together collaboratively to find ways to promote nature's health on Bowen. This report's a draft. We're inviting input from the public. The Conservancy's already distributed an earlier draft to the OCP steering committee. And with community input, we're hoping to advance the draft to a final report. And so with that, as an introduction, over to Wendy and Tom.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you. So we're really excited to be here today. And Bob already told you who we are and what we're doing, but I want to also acknowledge the fact that this work is, it's principally the authorship is myself, Tom Sisk, and Jay Matsushiba, who's a geospatial analyst who works with us. And collectively, we have quite a lot of experience in global and regional biodiversity conservation professionally. But Tom and I are Bowen residents. And so we've volunteered our time, a tremendous amount of time for this effort because we care about what's happening on the island. And we see that the island is at an important inflection point in terms of decisions that get made. We've made really great strides and we have an incredible natural value that, as Bob said, the citizens put a tremendous amount of weight on. And yet we're also experiencing pretty rapid population growth and development. And so the biodiversity plan that you all received and that we'll talk about today, we're going to go through it as a bit of an overview so we can hit the highlights. But we also both have an ask and an invitation of council to help us with the next steps for implementation in terms of opportunities that we might not be aware of for ways that we can use these data and tools to support better decision-making, well, both for municipal staff and at higher level initiatives that the council is involved with. And so this is we're under a pretty rapid timeline to try and make this available to you all and at a relevant time for the OCP draft. And as Bob said, we're inviting comment and feedback on this plan at this point. So it's considered a draft. We hope to have it finalized after receiving more input from you all and others in the next several weeks to a month. So one thing that I just want to start off with, in addition, is that given the time we have, allocated, thanks, that's to keep me on time, helps if I turn it on. With the time allocated, what we're hoping to do is present those highlights of the plan to you all, and we'll be referencing the page numbers. So if it's additional interest, you can look on the PDF document that you all have. we're going to prioritize hitting those highlights and then leaving hopefully 10 or 15 minutes for discussion and Q&A at the end if we stay on track. And the other important thing I want to start with is to say that we come here not with all of the answers, but with an offer to help support your work and that of municipal staff with the tools we've developed and start a longer conversation about how to put them into action. Okay, so with that as the preamble, let's see if this will work. There we go. Okay, so why does Bowen need a biodiversity plan? We've done pretty well without one so far. The short answer is that the citizens of Bowen put a tremendously high value on living in proximity to nature, wildlife, and prioritize the conservation of that. As Bob mentioned, the OCP survey makes that very clear, as do our workshops and several other previous surveys. And what's interesting is that there's often a big disconnect between those aspirational statements of value and then how we put them into practice in terms of the day-to-day decisions. And so I can highlight, for example, like climate treaties or global or national biodiversity targets. It's really easy in many ways to say we're committing to do X by Y. It's a lot harder to support the day-to-day decisions, the hundreds to thousands of day-to-day decisions that would get us there. And so that's where this plan comes in, is we're trying to develop the data and resources that have been missing so far from Bowen and practical tools that allow the inclusion of nature in planning, allow the inclusion of nature in planning and management. So this is where biodiversity assessment can help, is that we built the technical tools that allow for an assessment of what we have. So that's the current pattern of biodiversity, and identify among those places which ones are most important to protect. And that's a really hard question to answer. So we'll show you our attempt at answering it today. And those places are probably worthy of our attention and deserve additional protection if we can offer it. And so again, the tools don't offer an answer, but they provide a scientific basis for identifying actions that could support or protect biodiversity in the future. And that's similar to maybe plans that you're familiar with for transportation. You know, we have a regional transportation plan. Maybe we need a Bowen transportation plan. Or safety plans. They don't say, here's exactly what you do, but it provides the structure and a framework for thinking about what do you do in the event of X. And so the biodiversity plan is very similar. And from our perspective as scientists, the data and the tools are the critical gap that are missing in solving these problems. So I'm not going to go into the technical details of this plan, but Tom and I are happy to answer questions about it anytime, but in the Q&A, but afterwards as well. But instead focus on what the tools reveal about the patterns of biodiversity and the opportunity it presents for advocacy and decision-making, which I do believe, and we believe, is pretty transformational for the island in terms of this is something that's not available to most communities, although we would think it really could be. And before we get into that detail of saying which places are more and less important, it's really important to remind everybody that we live in a very important place for biodiversity. Okay, so British Columbia is the most biodiverse province in Canada. We have more than half of the bird species present in Canada, the greatest number of freshwater fishes, the highest diversity of mammals and plants. And this map is showing you in the darker colors, the blues, are showing you places where that diversity is higher. And what you can see is that Bowen sits right in one of the highest biodiversity regions of the province. And so that's really important to keep in mind, is that everything on Bowen is important. And yet we're all faced with trade-offs and decisions where we have to decide, what do we save and what do we not save? Okay, so just as a reminder, we're going to go into that sort of trade-off analysis, but I just want to keep that in mind, that we're not saying that there's places on Bowen that are not important, because they all are. And unfortunately, biodiversity is in decline. And I'm not going to dwell on this because it can be pretty depressing, but the most recent assessment shows that biodiversity has declined by more than 73% since 1970, and especially in freshwater species and habitats, but terrestrial as well. And we know why. And so these are sort of those frustrating death by 1,000 cuts, if you will, which is that, and these are things that, while that might seem abstract and global in nature, they're real to Bowen, because the drivers are things like a decline in forest cover, increases in residential and commercial development, the loss or degradation of habitat due to human use, and the fragmentation of those habitats into smaller and smaller parcels that are further apart from one another. And the similar patterns in freshwater, we know that the development of riparian areas has huge impacts. And the inclusion of barriers, things like roads and passageways that impede the movement of species, draining and filling of wetlands, water diversion for human use that then becomes in competition with biodiversity. Those are the major drivers of biodiversity loss. And there's others too, like direct exploitation, invasive species, emerging diseases. We're not immune to those either, but the big ones that I think are the death by 1,000 cuts that you and we collectively can make progress on are these land use and freshwater habitat change issues. And climate change is modifying all of these things. So I don't in any way need to discount that. So what have we done about it? Well, Canada has committed to what's called now the Global Biodiversity Framework, along with 196 other countries. It used to be called the Convention on Biological Diversity. And the most important things are that the commitment requires that we halt and reverse biodiversity loss by 2030 by protecting 30% of lands and inland waters. So you've heard of this before, I'm certain. It's called the 30 by 30 initiative. And so it frames some examples that we're going to use today to just illustrate how could you bring that to ground on Bowen. Canada is also committed to things like developing a national nature strategy, which is underway, and new legislation to ensure accountability. Unfortunately, that's currently absent and sidelined, but we can talk about that later. The other piece that I want to make sure to start off with is this has not been just an academic exercise conducted behind closed doors. We designed this from the beginning around structured input from experts and engaged citizens. And so for the past 2 years, we've been part of a group of local experts that we have called ourselves the Caring for Nature Initiative, that became a committee on the Bowen Island Conservancy. And it's been dedicated to building this biodiversity plan to assess the state of nature on Bowen. The community engagement that's key to this work has involved gathering values and priorities from the community. So we've been guided by over 140 participants in 2 major community workshops. And from that, we've heard that there's broad support for this data-driven scientific approach and an appreciation for the way in which we've incorporated the advice and input of local experts and the data that's collected on Bowen. Those folks that have participated in this also helped us rank what they think are the most important threats that are coming in the future to biodiversity. And so you'll see that in the details here. So the question that motivates this work in the simplest form is that we're trying to ask where the most important areas are on Bowen that should be conserved to ensure species and ecosystems thrive, not just now, but for generations to come. And that is the direct opposition to that death by 1,000 cuts. What decisions do we make one at a time to ensure that these things are preserved? So let me give you the quick outline of the biodiversity plan. You have this in front of you, so I'm not going to dwell on this, but we start with a sort of a purpose and overview. We talk about the patterns of biodiversity, and that's where we've really compiled a lot of data to speak to that question. We've compiled information on threats to biodiversity, and then we put those together in this conservation analysis to be able to make specific recommendations to say, here are the things that we identify as really important coming out of the analysis. So that's in the sort of planning for a biodiverse future and the recommendations section, which we'll leave some time for. So under the purpose, I've kind of already hit the highlights of this. The idea is to bring together the best existing data for tools for analysis and mapping. And you'll see very quickly that this is largely a mapping exercise, which requires that you go from, just to take a moment, it requires you going from, let's say, walking out in the woods there and seeing a varied thrush calling right now, to knowing what is the relative abundance of varied thrush across the whole island. So I know I saw one there. How do I know if that's unusual or common in that place compared to around Killarney Lake? And so that's the really challenging technical component of this work that we're not going to go into in a lot of detail, but just so you know that there's a lot underneath the hood here in terms of mapping these things that allow us to assess the value of biodiversity when we stack all those things together. Another key piece is that we really believe in the transparency and democratization of this information. So everything that we develop is open source for all the way down to the code, which I'm sure not very many of you are interested in. It's all publicly available and accessible. And the idea is to use this to identify actions to restore and protect biodiversity, support the kind of planning that goes on by the municipality and the council in decision-making at many levels of government. Okay, so in pictures then, not technical, we're going to talk about how we've used data collected data on species. We have 195 species represented in this plan, which were readily available modeled data, ground truth by observations on Bowen, 33 different habitats, and one layer that has to do with the intactness or the way in which the habitats have been modified by human presence. And so with this approach, we go through a data screening to make sure that those are worthy of inclusion, they're at the correct resolution, ideally that they've all been assessed locally somehow. Those all feed into a process to develop through what's called a conservation prioritization algorithm to come up with a map, which is on page 24 of the plan, of conservation values. So this is a shore-to-shore map, as Bob calls it, that shows you for every 100 meter by 100 meter pixel of Bowen, which cells are more and less valuable to conservation writ large. Okay, and so that's really the core output of this work. And then you can slice and dice that map in a lot of different ways for different applications. Okay, so I'm gonna quickly go over how we get to that map by combining these species, habitat, and ecological intactness data. And then we're gonna move on from there pretty quickly. So when we stack up 195 species where we have information about them from across the entire island, and we say where are species more and less common, this is what it looks like. So this is called species richness, which is the most common way that most people represent diversity, biodiversity. And the darker parts of this map represent places where more of those species overlap as being present. So the darker places, you went out and did a bird survey, you would expect to find more birds than you would find, let's say, on the top of Mount Gardner, where the density is, or the number of species is lower. We also did something similar with habitats, and these are data that have been a product of more than a decade-long work by Metro Vancouver and others called the Sensitive Ecosystem Inventory. And we used that plus local data from Alan Whitehead about all freshwater habitats that were very carefully mapped by him. And again, the darker places on this map represent places where more of those unique habitat types overlap in 100 meter by 100 meter pixel. And so you can kind of see the sort of river, stream networks, and wetlands kind of emerging from that picture of where there are more habitat types compared to fewer. Okay, so imagine you've put all those layers together, and then we have one more, which is ecological intactness. And this one is a global effort to evaluate how humans have modified landscapes and fresh waters. And again, it's a super high resolution effort for all of the data that we use comes from a British Columbia focused work that we've been doing with colleagues at UNBC. What it shows you is historic and current land modification. These bright colors on the map represent the more modified, the less intact places on the island, which are no surprise where the core of human activity is, the cove and the main roads and places where there are higher densities of houses and impervious surfaces. What we also know is that there's basically no place on Bowen that is absent of modification, right? The entire island was basically logged 100 years ago. But there are places, the darker parts on this map, that are less modified, and we know that those contribute more value to biodiversity than places that are heavily modified by humans. Okay, so again, in pictures, imagine putting all of those layers together, the 195 species, the 32 habitats, the ecological intactness, and you stack them up like a layer cake across the whole island. And that roughly gives you the starting template for thinking about how we arrive at a conservation values map. We put all of them together to identify these priority places. And so this map, the conservation values map that you can see on the right, shows you the darker colored green, shows you places of higher value. And then the yellowy kind of lighter colors are, generally speaking, lower value. Again, remembering that every place on Bowen has high ecological and biodiversity value. Okay, so with that map, so that map is a tremendous amount of the time and effort that has gone into this plan has been in developing that map, refining it, being careful about the data and the assumptions. With that map, we can now ask different questions of it. And what I'm showing you here is if we just show the top 30% of highest conservation values on the island, you get the map on the right. And so we're simplifying that map to say, where are the places that are the most important? And right now we're just using 30% as a simple example because of that 30 by 30 framing, but you could pick 50%. If you say, no, actually, I think nature needs half, then you could say, what does it look, where are the top 50% of places on Bowen? Or maybe you want to look at some number that's lower. Okay, so you can do this at any threshold that you think is relevant. And just for a moment, this is not in your agenda, but I apologize for that. I didn't have this ready to include. This is a link to a place where you can actually interact with the maps and choose that threshold for yourself. And so I'm going to pause for just a moment and show you what that looks like. If I can get the internet works well here, which I think it does. Should reload in just a second. Okay, so this is an interactive data atlas version of what we're showing you in the biodiversity plan. And there's a bunch of stuff that you're supposed to read, but I'm going to jump right over it just to show you. It's organized just the same as the plan: patterns of biodiversity, conservation analysis, threats, planning for a biodiverse future. If we go to that conservation analysis, you get this integrated conservation values map. The colors are slightly different. It's just to make it a little easier to see with some of the different overlaps that we're going to do. But what you'll see is that there's a little slider here. And this is if you're showing 100% of the places on the island. If you want to simplify that and show, let's say, the top 50% of places, then there are those places. And you can zoom in and out on this map, and you'll see that you can also overlay some of the other things that we have developed here for you to see: land ownership, and where's the private land, where's the protected areas, what are the threats. Okay, so that's available just so that you can understand that the 30% example that I'm showing you here is just one of many things that you could use these data to explore. Back to the PowerPoint.
Incredible that that worked.
Wow, good thing that it worked.
Usually those things foul up somewhere.
No, I credit that to Jay, who lives in Japan right now, and he's like, he works when we're asleep, so everything's great. So the next section of the plan is really about threats. So we're going to come back to that conservation map. It's going to be the core of what we talk about. But first, I want to tell you about two threats that we developed. One is about development pressure, and the other is about wildfire vulnerability. These we heard from the community. Okay, it's very, very important to the community. There was a third thing, which was invasive species, which we didn't have the opportunity or time to develop, but that's on the sort of docket for what would we do next. The threats to biodiversity, as they emerge through human development pressure, we actually did a lot of consultation with Daniel Martin about this, because he thinks about this deeply. He thinks about which parcels on the island are available for subdivision and how important are those places. And so it was really easy for us to basically take the knowledge that he has already given current rules and say, which of these parcels, these are just the large subdividable parcels on Bowen. The darker colors represent parcels that can be subdivided into more, what are they called? Primary residential units or residential units. They could have more residential units on them. And it goes upwards of like 15 or 20 residential units given current regulations. Okay, so that's an important piece that we're going to come back to that represents potential development pressure to biodiversity. The second piece is wildfire. And when there's questions about this, I'm going to turn it over to Tom, who's a wildfire expert. But for now, I'm just going to say that this is an index that highlights areas where wildfire could have larger impacts to biodiversity. And so that's really different than how we usually think about wildfire. The kinds of maps that are provided by the province and by the fire department, these wildland urban interface maps, really focus on human safety and wildfire preparedness from a structural and human safety standpoint. This is quite different. This is saying, where are the places where wildfire could have large impacts to biodiversity? So not necessarily about humans. And so we don't want this to be misinterpreted. It's something quite different from the wildland urban interface. And so caution is advised, not apply this to any other interpretation. But the pink areas on here are places of high wildfire vulnerability to biodiversity. Okay, those are drier soils. They're more exposed. They're more likely to burn hotter, things like that. And now the conservation analysis section of the plan is where we take these pieces and we put them together. Okay, so we take the conservation values map and we combine it with lots of these other layers. And you'll see, I think, quickly how that leads to some pretty clear conclusions. So the approach looks like this. If we just take that 30% top conservation values, the map that's shown in right there, and you want to say, how many of those special places are already within our protected areas? Are we good? Like, are they all already protected? We don't know that until we overlay the protected areas map and say what percentage falls within existing protection. So we do that for intactness, private lands, wildfire risk, and development. I'm not going to show all of them today, but there's 2 pages devoted to each one of those topics in the biodiversity plan. So for example, here's the map with private lands overlaid on top of those 30% highest value conservation places. And remember that threshold can change. But at 30%, it means that almost half of those important places fall on private land. So that means landowners have to be engaged as part of the solutions for protecting biodiversity. It means we can't just solve this with more protected areas alone. Okay. Here are the protected areas, for example. So that purple area are our existing parks and protected areas that have durable conservation, protections against development. And that falls into several different categories, as you'll see by the map there. 22%, so not even a quarter of those places are currently protected. So that means that the current protected area network is great, but it's not always protecting our highest, most valuable biodiverse places on the island. And then here's the wildfire map. The wildfire map suggests that about a quarter of those important places have exposure to pretty high vulnerability to wildfire. Okay, so that might help provide things like future protections, when you might pick places that have lower wildfire vulnerability, or several other ways that you can use this map to then guide decision making. We'll talk about that in a minute when we get to the recommendations. And then here's the future development pressure map. And so this one's a little bit different because what we've done is we've taken the parcel boundaries and we've asked how much biodiversity value is within each of those parcels. So we've summed the value within each of the parcel outlines. And so what that does is it takes into account the parcel size and the conservation values within it. And then the darker colors here represent those parcels that could be subdivided that have very high biodiversity value when you sum up all the pixels that fall within each of those parcels. And the quick numerical statistic we provided here is that when you look at some of those parcels that could be subdivided, they have 100 times the summed conservation value of the average private land parcel on both. Okay, so some places are really important to biodiversity, and that might give us pause if a proposal came across to consider doing something dramatic to those parcels. We would argue that that would be a reason to think about, is there a way to work with the landowner to consider biodiversity in that development? The last kind of extension that I'll show you from the analysis is one that's hypothetical. So one thing that happens a lot in conservation biology and the kind of planning that we do is that it's used to support new protected area planning networks. Okay, and so we're calling these candidate lands for protection. These are hypothetical. So the purple shown on this map is our existing protected area network. And then the orange represent places where if we say, where are the places that would be the next best places to protect that would help build that protected areas network, meaning that it has connections with the existing protected areas and it's protecting some of those highest value places, what would that look like? So these are restricted only to Crown lands, and it represents how do you get to a 30 by 30 goal, just as one hypothetical. And what you can see is that there are 5 or 6 parcels that we would call candidates for future protection. Our map can be used to build these in lots of different ways. This is just the one that is the simplest that emerges from this analysis. And again, restricted to Crown lands only. The other thing that emerges that I've just shown on the map here, animated, is that there are lots of protected areas that are pretty disconnected from each other. And our conservation values map can also say, where are the areas of highest biodiversity value that might serve to connect those disconnected pieces? And that traverses all kinds of land designations. That could be private land, it could be municipal land, but it's going to require identifying how do you support biodiversity through things like those corridors requires a collaborative approach with private landowners and others, community engagement. Okay, so those we've highlighted are some of the obvious high value corridors that emerge from our analysis. Again, those can be drawn in lots of different ways. That's just one example. Okay, so it's intended to illustrate one of many possible conservation outcomes, and you can play with this yourself. And so these are the kinds of spatial tools that we can make available to Daniel and others so that in terms of planning, he can have access to the same sort of information. Okay, so we've arrived at recommendations, and these are laid out quite clearly in the plan, but I just want to take the opportunity to emphasize that we've structured our recommendations in 3 key areas. One, the first one is a practical one that we come to you today asking for help with, because I think the council and the OCP committee can play a big role in this, which is to adopt the conservation values map and its related scientific findings into future land use and management planning efforts, most notably the OCP development and draft. And so I'll talk about that in the next slide for just a little bit. The second one emerges from the basics of conservation biology and conservation planning, which is that these tools do allow us to say, how can we advocate and identify new protected areas on Bowen that would best strengthen and improve the value of the existing conservation network that we already have. And then the third one is related, which is to use these tools to enhance and protect habitats that connect what we're calling those large core areas of habitat that increase the value of the conservation network as a whole. So just to offer a tiny bit more detail about each of these, because the first one is really, I think, in your wheelhouse and also for us to ask for your feedback, is that adopting the conservation values maps is something that we have ideas about how you might do that, but you have more informed ideas about other ways that you might be able to use this in a productive way. So the first one is that incorporating the conservation values map as a scheduled map in the OCP seems like a key finding and a key recommendation that we are coming to you with. And also to do things like formalize the language that prioritizes conservation and Bowen's commitment to protecting biodiversity in the OCP. And as you know, the OCP has a lot of aspirational language about nature and biodiversity protection and not a lot of tools for how to get there, right? So we're trying to fill that gap. And so that's where this comes in and why we've really been motivated to get this draft ready to intersect with the OCP process. Committing to incorporating biodiversity data and future zoning, land management, and visioning processes seems like one that is hopefully an easy ask. Establishing a municipal biodiversity database where all of this information can live. So from this report and other sources as permanent data and map repositories, so that in a few years, this doesn't disappear into the ether and is forgotten by time. As I said, my lab is currently hosting all of these data in a public repository, but we need something more permanent, I think, to ensure that this kind of information is available and people don't have to do their own sort of due diligence every time they're needed. Bolstering relationships with local experts to facilitate information transfer and scientific review. Through this process, we've intersected with a lot of folks on Bowen who have a tremendous amount of expertise and time that they're willing to give to these efforts. So that's a group of people that I think could be tapped into more than it has been so far to provide review or their expertise, on an as-needed basis. And then I think that because this is a pretty unique biodiversity plan, it puts Bowen in a position of leadership as a municipality that's acting on its commitment to conserve biodiversity and contribute to meeting some of those conservation goals like 30 by 30 as a municipality, to show the way, to say we can do this from the ground up in addition to having these aspirational national and provincial scale goals. Quickly over the new protected areas, we think that the Crown lands are obviously the first and easiest target, but there are others. And so on the Crown lands in particular, working with the province to remove some of those highest value areas from BC timber sales and pursue land designations that would offer more permanent protection is one potential goal or application, including identifying high value areas that are adjacent to those protected areas, as a larger contiguous area that's protected is beneficial for biodiversity in lots of ways. And then we have a few specific recommendations that have emerged from our analysis, which include protecting some of the remnant old growth areas and mature forests on Mount Gardner and Mount Collins, and the perched wetlands that contain a tremendous amount of biodiversity that may not be designated as such. And so that's where sort of some of the on the ground expertise comes in here in terms of permanent and ephemeral wetlands. Connectivity is a hard problem, and it's one that is going to require real engagement by the community to connect those protected areas, which improve the value of the entire network. And so identifying and mapping corridors along waterways and ridge tops, including identifying potential barriers that could be remediated that are interfering with movement, are some of the key goals there. And that is really a community level engagement process that I think the municipality and the council can do. And so some of that is supporting and incentivizing landowners to partner with the municipality and community organizations to enhance connectivity. Okay, so a final word is that what's particularly unique, or maybe what might be most useful to planners and the OCP and the community, is that our project provides these new tools for conservation planning. It helps identify priorities, it helps map future threats, and with those things in hand, you can explore trade-offs and outcomes for almost any land use scenario that might come across your desk or that might be envisioned. It makes it possible to directly integrate biodiversity considerations into many aspects of future decision-making where it hasn't really come into play in the past. So where are we going with this in terms of next steps? Well, we hope that this helps us move from good intentions to good actions. And we really look forward to working closely with the council, the OCP committee, and the municipality and others to make sure everybody has access to the information and ability to apply the tools, understanding of it. Because that shared knowledge leads to greater understanding, clearer planning, and more efficient implementation. We're in the public review process right now. We've made the data, maps, and analysis available to the OCP committee, the municipality, and others. And we're working on revising the draft biodiversity plan. We're open to feedback. Anybody can send us an email with any thoughts or suggestions, and we will revise this over the coming weeks for a public release aimed for April 2026. We also hope to engage more deeply with Squamish Nation and other First Nations in ways that at times that they deem helpful and appropriate. And we've begun the planning and background research for an implementation plan that we hope to advance partnership with the Muni and Conservancy and input from residents and organizations. And then lastly, I just want to emphasize the incredible effort that the Caring for Nature team has invested in this process. It's a reflection of the thousands of hours of volunteer work, discussions, analysis, and critique, and many other pathways that have brought us to this point. And so we believe that the plan is worthy of Bowen Island and recognizes the values held so dearly by its residents. So we ask for your support and feedback and help with the pathway to its adoption. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Full disclosure, I'm a member of the Caring for Nature Committee, as is Councillor Trustee Getty. And but I just wanted to mention, ask about the perched wetlands.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a little bit about them and where they are? Because I haven't heard that term about Bowen yet.
Yeah, and it might not be I actually am a wetland expert, but I'm not adept at the various definitions, like formal definitions. And so I would call it a perched wetland. So there are several of them on the island. I'm sure those of you who've hiked around in some of the more remote places have stumbled across them. Some of them are beaver created and others are ephemeral, meaning that they fill seasonally, usually with winter rains and snow melt, and then they'll dry out by midsummer. Those can serve as really important habitats for species. They were detected in the sensitive ecosystem inventory data, and then we know from personal experience where some of those places match up with the sensitive ecosystem inventory.
So the perch just means they're higher up, they're not in the value.
That's right. So they don't just sit in the sort of the low
Drainages.
places where you would expect where a stream is coming through, like the
Right.
wetland in south of Barney Lake.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. I do know what those are then. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
I'm sure you've seen some.
Yes, I've sent a motion into Sophie when you're ready for a chair.
Thank you. Through the chair, thanks for that presentation. full disclosure, I'm not part of that group. And I gotta say, that was way more interesting than I thought it was gonna be. It was really information. Well, to be honest with you, it
No,
was.
I'm a biology
I
professor, so
wanna-
I get that all the time.
Okay, just one observation that I'd like you to either validate or comment, and then I've got a question at the
Yeah.
end of that. What I saw there was, presumably solid science. I can trust you on that because I'm not gonna back check it. That essentially put a score on every square meter really on the island.
Yeah.
And it looked to me like the plan is identifying those with the highest value, the way you define that value. And then most of the efforts seem to be focused at maintaining or improving those areas,
Mhm.
as opposed to looking at other areas and not trying to bring that. And I don't even know if you can
Yeah.
bring it, but we're sort of, here's the places that are really good right now. Let's maintain these as opposed to, here's the places that are not so good. Let's try and bring them up.
It's a really,
That just may be too difficult to do. I don't know, but is that an accurate statement of what you're trying to do here?
it's two different things, and I'm gonna welcome Tom to chime in here as well, because one of them is the basic biology of, for example, on top of mountains, there are fewer species.
Right.
Right, so you're never, no amount of restoration is ever gonna bring twice as many species to the top of Mount Gardner as would have naturally occurred in the low elevation areas. So those are part of the basic pattern of biodiversity. Then what you're talking about is that some of the places that we have deemed lower value are because they are highly disturbed by human activities. And so those are given a little bit of a downweighted score in our analysis. Those are places where actually I think what you're talking about are very reasonable, like places that we say, these should be high biodiversity value. They show up as having high overlap with, human structures or human presence. Those would be the focus of things like restoration efforts. And that's a whole nother arm of how this information can be used.
Thank you. Okay, so just to follow up, the question I had then was, given what we saw here and when you were showing the maps, of those high value areas, 42% of them were privately owned. And it looked to me like the bulk of the recommendations, were about Crown land, primarily because that's stuff we can actually do stuff with as opposed to private property. But other than the couple of comments within the connectivity piece, how, 42% is an awful lot, and
Yes.
more than one or two recommendations on how to do that. I don't know if there's a lot more that individual homeowners can or will do, frankly. Some of them will, some of them won't, obviously, but beyond us adopting this and saying, this is cool, let's get the information out, that kind of thing. Are there further recommendations you can ultimately make to individual homeowners or property owners and say, this would be really good and it's not going to hurt the value of your land,
Yep.
which is going to be a primary concern for
Oh,
them.
let Tom take this one.
Yeah, I take the point in the sense that it appears that there's a lower weighting for those areas. I don't think that was the intent in the sense, another way to look at it is if you look at the map of the high priority areas, a lot of them occur in areas where human are concentrated. And one way to look at that is like, wow, despite the impact of the development, they're still really important because those tend to be areas that are valuable. It's why we like them. It's why a lot of biodiversity likes them. And those should be really kept in focus. And what we're trying to present is that they're super important, and working there is very different because of the ownership patterns and history and whatnot. But those are the areas where collaboration and restoration and working together, providing incentives so that as development moves forward, we take the time to say, how can we integrate the conservation values with all the other values and see if there's a good approximation. One thing I'll say is that can be very controversial as well, because people generally don't like their private property rights to be in question or their actions to be limited. And to that, I'd say it's where this sort of analysis really becomes valuable, because as you share information and as you provide people an avenue for really discussing these matters in depth, the perception that there's a conflict there tends to dissolve. And generally people find more areas of agreement than disagreement, and more areas where agreement allows you to move forward and avoid the areas where there really are conflicts. So it's complicated in terms of this participatory approach that Wendy was talking about. And it does, I think, break down into different strategies overall. Where there are public lands, we may advocate for larger blocks to be designated. In areas where their land ownership is complex, we really need to develop relationships, but they're complementary approaches for biodiversity.
And if I can just add one quick thing, that Bob referenced this, is that one of the initiatives of the Caring for Nature group, that's the next phase of sort of thinking about implementation, includes things like a best practices guide for homeowners that would say, here are some things that you can do to help enhance biodiversity on your property, voluntary, but getting the word out and saying, here are easy things you can do, here are harder things. You can think about engaging in the covenant process if you're really committed. There's a lot of levers available to private landowners that can be beneficial.
Okay, yeah, you were asking for feedback, right? And I appreciate hearing that. So the feedback from me is that's going to, because this is
Yeah.
42% of what we're talking
Yeah.
about, at least today. Getting that educational piece, I guess, is going to be really critical to success.
I agree with that, because 42% is a lot.
It's a big number, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Jurgensen?
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair to the presenters. First of all, thank you for the presentation. Really appreciate it, and all the work that the Conservancy does. I do have a question about the technical side. And that's regarding, you mentioned a more robust home for the data and the code. First of all, by the way, what is that code written in, if you happen to know? And second of all, what kind of more long-term repository do you envision for that data that would be helpful to the Conservancy?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So for the immediate, your first question is that the code is written in R and Python, both open sources, and we've documented it in open source platforms. So like it's currently available to anybody who would be interested in GitHub, for those of you who are nerding out on this. But that's still within my sort of research group at SWU. And we would like to, we would hope to see that there is a long-term option for data to be held by the municipality, so that we don't lose this information 10 years into the future, 5 years into the future. And so I think it could take a lot of different forms, but when we've talked to Daniel about this a bit, and obviously he would have access to these geospatial data, and then he just needs to get them uploaded to BOMAP by whoever does the GIS in the background for the municipality. But I think more than that, it's about keeping the data publicly accessible so that it's there to be built upon.
To add one other thing that's in the report itself, but we would envision this as a living capacity, and the database that we have now will be updated over time, or should be. Additional layers might be added, and so having a permanent repository will really facilitate that, not just the sharing of data today, but also the enhancement, improvement, and growth of that information resource in the future.
And I can just offer for the near term, Jay Matsushiba, who's on this project, like he's very committed to this. And so, and is also the technical lead on the sort of data accessibility side of this. And he's the programmer. So he has time available to have those conversations with whomever is the right person at the municipality or elsewhere.
And I'd like to add one other thing about funding, is that we benefited from funding from the Sitka Foundation, from SFU, research funds, and a few other sources. And we believe that if this approach is adopted and used, it'll be very straightforward to seek additional funding to keep this effort going. So we're not asking for someone else to find money to build a data repository.
Yeah.
We want to work on that as soon as we can demonstrate that this is going somewhere and it's actually going to be used. The funding for what we're talking about is not big, and we don't see it. We're not expecting the public, the municipality to step up.
Yeah, that
We
should.
want to work with the municipality to build that resource base.
Okay,
Thank you. That was a very much larger answer than I was expecting, and I
Sorry.
really appreciate that. No, so much more great information. Thank you so much. I always appreciate the detailed responses.
You. Overwhelming thanks to you and the whole team. We are just so fortunate. And we've seen it earlier this year with the information we got on Grafton Lake and having residents who are, experts and a lot of volunteer work. And I think you've also indicated that the community is very interested in volunteering more. So we got a gem here, if we can build it, keep building it, it'll be great. And it'll be a real tool, I think, for us to help make informed decisions on development. One question is, over time, is there a way that you can measure the changes we see? In other words, if we're looking at certain areas, so in other words, is a big deal to redo this in 5 years and compare them?
It's a great question. To the extent that the habitats change, Metro Vancouver has committed to updating the sensitive ecosystem inventory, which is all remotely sensed data, which is just amazing. And then it's ground truth. They do that on a 5 to 10 year basis. So if habitats are changing, like for example, with climate or with direct restoration effort or new development, that will get picked up in the subsequent remotely sensed data from space, essentially. And those layers can quite easily be re-downloaded and incorporated into this planning effort. It's a bit of an effort, but it wouldn't be the same to do it again as it was to do it from scratch. In part because of the last question, we have all of the workflows and the data process now laid out in code, so that if you can, in a sense, like if you could take off the shelf a new layer from Metro Vancouver, it wouldn't be as much work to sort of hit play and make it all run again to come up with a new conservation value or to see how it's changed. It's a bit of an effort, but it's much less than the sort of 18-month process we've had to go through to start it.
A different answer to that question, your question brought up for me is, I also am really hopeful, and I think the whole C4N group is, that this will inspire on the ground activities. That this is just, there are so many of them, but the educational power of this is great. And I could envision interested people monitoring, for example, movements of animals in areas that have connectivity and areas where that connectivity has been lost, or looking at particular characteristics of conservation areas where we are doing some restoration work and monitoring what are the effects of that. Those are the sort of on the ground things that we could never afford to do in a paid professional kind of framework. But the citizens of Bowen, there's every indication that people are motivated. And if they have a shared mission and a little bit of organization, a lot could be done. And that's where our, understanding the Conservancy, for example, and how empowering that could be to the citizens to really share this information really broadly in other organizations on Bowen that overlap in their mission and interests. And so, this could become a very powerful community outreach, and the community in turn may provide some of the future data, which is what you're talking about.
And I'm thinking that the whole idea of a backyard handbook too. People are going to be able to observe what happens in their own yard. And
some of the biggest advances really in biodiversity conservation recently have come from networks of cameras called camera trapping, where you can see the frequency with which animals pass through certain areas or use certain habitats, and the tools and techniques for analyzing those data have come so far so fast. It's really quite amazing, and a topic for another talk at some point. And that's something that's certainly doable.
I'll actually show it to you. There's somewhere on the order of 40,000 observations on Bowen on what's called iNaturalist, which is a community science platform where anybody can record what's going on in their backyard or when they go on a hike. This is just the density of observations. And so, yeah, that's another way that you could imagine engaging the community and observing biodiversity and the improvement to biodiversity through their small scale action. There's deer. There are deer.
Yeah, a lot of those are probably here. You can see
No.
the dense clusters of observations along
Yeah.
favorite trails
Favorite
and
trails.
roadways, and that's one of the problems that needs to be overcome
Yeah.
in using this sort of information, because it has that inherent bias, but it still has value, and
It
there are
does.
ways to use it responsibly.
Councilor Moore?
Can you go back to the
Yeah.
previous map?
You bet. That's fine.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand the tremendous amount of work gone into this. I mean, it's just been not the first time I've seen this, but still trying to understand the map.
Fair enough.
So you've shown pink as being private land,
Uh-huh.
but there's also the green, which I'm assuming are dark green. That's the conservation areas where there's conservation values.
That's the top 30%. So if you just say, what's the top 30% by area on Bowen of the most important conservation lands? Those are those dark pixels. And so you can see where you can kind of see through, we've made the red part kind of transparent, so you can see where those pixels occur on private land.
Yeah, because the Cape Roger Curtis and.
Right.
the one that sort of, I mean, those lots on the water are private property,
They're
so.
private property. Yeah, and that one's a little hard to see because they're all red and green.
Yeah, so that was what I was. trying to-
Yeah,
okay, trying
They're
to
quite valuable,
understand.
those areas.
Okay, and, you're talking about getting input and everything now, so those two links that you had on the last slide, can those be actually sent to us?
Yes, you have one of them. I just didn't include the one that had that interactive map, but I will definitely send it to you.
How does the public provide input?
Well, when we we're planning to, so we've been doing this in like a phased process. So originally we got feedback from the Caring for Nature group. Anybody who participated in the workshops has also been given access and have provided feedback. We've already gone through one round of revisions based on that. And the Conservancy has had it for a couple of weeks. We're waiting to get input from them. You now have it. Now the slides are on public record, and the intention is to make the draft more broadly available. I'm not sure we've talked about exactly how we're going to launch that, but it is available for feedback at this point as far as we're concerned.
And I have to say so you can email either or both of us with any comments you have or your friends have or whatever. Wendy and I will initially go through that list and annotate it and think about it and make suggestions, and then we go with the full Caring for Nature group, go through the comments received and what we
And
propose
discuss.
doing it, propose changes to the plan. And we've done that a couple of times already, and we plan on doing it at least once and probably 2 more times before the plan really becomes the final version. And we went through all of that because we really don't want this to just sort of appear out of thin air as, well, who are these people? What are they saying? Should I trust them? But to really give everybody the opportunity to comment and actually, receive some feedback on comments and see, how that affects the final, so that hopefully by the time we get to that stage, it will be seen as really a community document. And that's not to say that it can't change after that either. We really believe in the power of the information and analysis, and that community engagement is really the only way to achieve lasting conservation outcomes.
And we are planning to share this information in an article in the Undercurrent, and potentially even a mailer to quite a few, if not everyone on Bowen. So there are ways that I think we're going to get the word out in phases in the next coming couple of weeks. But the link that you have to the plan, the draft plan, is shareable. Anybody who has that link is welcome to look at it and hop on this part. But we'll continue to try and get the
And
word
that's
out.
the link that's up there?
It's the link that you were sent, because it's quite a large document. It's a PDF, and it's like
That's the one I.
50 megabytes or something. So it's not easy to attach to an email. So it's just sitting in a public repository that anybody can access and download.
Any other questions? Great.
I have a motion.
You have a motion. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay, I've sent it to Sophie, so maybe you can put it up on the screen. And I would like to move, I'm gonna add the word draft in because I just tried to make that.
Yes.
That, so it'll be the draft diversity plan. So I move that the committee of the whole recommend to council referring the, that council refer the draft Bowen Island Biodiversity Plan and tools to the Advisory Planning Commission and the Parks, Environment and Climate Action Committee, Advisory Committee for consideration of input to the Caring for Nature team. And that the committee of the whole recommend that council refer the Bowen Island Biodiversity, the draft Bowen Island Biodiversity Plan, and specifically the conservation values map to the official community plan steering committee for consideration of adoption as a scheduled map in the revised official community plan.
Councilor White? Any discussion?
Through the chair, just one question. I'm not clear on the last phrase in the first paragraph for consideration of input to the Caring for Nature team, as opposed to let's send this to these different committees for response.
Well, I was thinking that the Parks and through the chair, I was thinking that the Parks, Environment and Climate Action Advisory Committee might have some suggestions that would make it more useful to future committees, or they might have a question that could be clarified in the plan and that they could send it to Wendy and Tom. I guess maybe the part about input to the Caring for Nature team, I've made it pretty general, but we could say to the authors of the report.
I get, like, I mean, I don't take exception to any there. I'm just curious to why, because normally the committees would report back to us with comment and then we would go somewhere else, I would think, but
Sure, if
ultimately, I like I said, I'm not taking exception to anything that's there. I'm just trying to figure out what the batting order is for what goes where and if that part was necessary or not, but.
well, I just wanted to have a tool to get it to the committees. So, because I thought they might have some valuable input if this is going to be a useful tool to the municipality and the community.
I have an amendment, and rather than bypassing council, now that it's become a delegation to council, that we bring it back to council. So the input from the advisory planning and the environment committee for recommendations, and then if there's anything that comes out of that, we can send it out.
Sure, so maybe at the end of that, could you put another bit that just says, then return to council with the results?
That recommendations on input.
Yeah, that's the part that is confusing to me. Okay.
Oh, I see. Yes, sorry, that was my typing.
A recommendation on input, like, are we asking,
On plan to the,
who are we asking to give the input, the committee or the
committee.
lost it now? Okay. Okay, so yeah. Or recommendation.
I guess maybe, I don't know, do you have a suggestion?
I
So
mean, that's what the committees do, right? They provide recommendations on input.
the recommendation rather than a recommendation. On input to whatever. What? No, it's. You're not caring for nature team. What do you call?
Broadly, I mean,
they are, or we can
Yeah.
call them the authors of the report.
yeah, or the authors of the report. We're keenly interested. This is a great initiative from our perspective, because if we could get that kind of expertise, like they read it and they tell us, here are things that would make this more useful. Now's the time for us to receive that kind of information. So
So this, just so I'm clear, this would now read that the committee, the various committees, they come up with recommendations, they go to the authors, and then it comes back to council? Is that what I'm hearing?
I'm-
I don't
What
know.
would people like? What would council like? Sophie?
Typically, a committee, like if you're referring it to a committee, the committee would report back with the recommendation to council.
Which would include input that we could then give to the group. That's what I understood, okay.
You need to put the for recommendations to council on input to the author.
Make it very clear. That clear?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, everybody. I don't know how to write that.
That's the very first part of that.
Do we have a second?
Yeah, Tim seconded it.
Okay, and the amendments were agreeable to both?
Yeah.
Right, so I'm gonna call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Right, and no one opposed, that's carried.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wanted to thank you all and just note that we really wanted to find the avenues for making this useful, and your help is gonna be super important from this point forward, just to know where we should turn and where we can apply efforts to help implement. So thank you.
As always, fantastic. Right. So, we now have staff reports. Next on the agenda, payment markings and signage. With Ms. Kosara as the presenter. Very good for you tonight, where we are with the in this project.
Good afternoon, the committee of the whole. So you wanted to know about the funding before I start the presentation?
At some point, I'm curious at what stage we're at in terms of, I think this is a project that is, this is the first step in terms of funding process.
We
Maybe not, okay.
Okay.
Obviously.
Okay. Sure. Sure. Today I'm presenting the Snug Cove signs and pavement markings, and I'd like to begin by asking everyone here to picture a very familiar moment at the Boyne Island. So, it's a busy ferry arrival, right? So the cars are leaving the ferry, and basically some of the pedestrians are crossing the road to the cafe. A car is trying to get out from the parking space, and some of the cars are rushing to get into the line, right? So at this moment and at this time, those few minutes are going to make this small stretch of the road the most complicated and very confusing area for pedestrians, for drivers, for visitors, and human beings here. So this is very important part of our community, and yet all the infrastructure there they're being built many years ago, and they are faded and they are not up to the standards. That's why exactly we took this study and we took this project. This was the rationale behind it. Through this presentation, I'm gonna walk through the full scope of the Boyne Island Trunk Road project, and we begin with overview of the project, and we follow to the key issues identified in the field, then examine the safety data that informed the recommendation, and then we'll go to the heart of the study. What are the short-term and long-term recommendations for this stretch of the road from the ferry terminal up to the Mount Gardner road. Then we'll talk about a practical standards guide and next step for this project. So basically, this project is not just about paints on the road or signs on the pole. It's about how thousands of people weekly are commuting through this small stretch of the island. And basically, we are trying to make it safe for the visitors, for commuters, for cars, for school students, right? And there are three main objectives for this project. Identify signage and marking aligned with the BC Ministry of Transportation and Transit, BCMO, and Transportation Association of Canada TAC standards, and improving safety for drivers, pedestrian and cyclists, and improve ferry queue management and traffic efficiency. This is very important for our community. So if you look at this data, you see that Snoqualmie is not a typical small town main street. It is functional to do a ferry terminal access route. It's a village commercial street, school access, pedestrian gathering area, and the only arterial road connecting the whole island. So basically, very few communities in BC, they do have such a interesting intersection here, very crowded, very complicated. And so basically, this complexity is exactly why we need to take this project and we need to move forward with it. So during the site visit with the engineers and staff, we walked through the whole area, and what we found out, a few patterns became very clear. Drivers were unsure where the ferry queues actually starts. So I'm guilty of that too myself, not being a resident, it happened to me many times. Pavement markings were faded, and some of them are inconsistent. And signage did not always follow provincial standards, and visitors had difficulty navigating the area. So, and none of these issues alone is catastrophic, right? But combination of all makes it confusing, and near misses will happen. Again, through the next slide, you can see that, pavement markings are a very usual thing here. They are faded and unclear. Crosswalk markings are faded. Directional arrows are confusing, especially near the ferry queuing. Ferry queue misaligned with left turn in some areas, and vehicles blocking parking areas during the ferry queues. Also, poor nighttime visibility due to the lack of reflective markings. So like I myself, I can attest to it. When I was walking very late in the evening, in winter, you cannot see signs, you cannot see, the markings on the pavement. So when the followings are the driver's behavior patterns that it's been shown and it's been experienced. So drivers accelerating to pass vehicles existing ferry, U-turn to join ferry lines are very common. Vehicles blocking the intersection when queue is full. Drivers leaving vehicle unattended, and they just go having coffee or salvage. These behaviors are often triggered by unclear lane and signage. So when those movements are not clearly organized by us, it's small confusion can quickly become near misses, congestions, and collisions. And the collisions data confirms that some of these conflict points are real, particularly around the Ferry Quay area at Miller and Dorman intersection. So the collision summary on this slide shows that 18 collisions happened reported by RCMP between 2015 to 2021, 20 crashes reported by ICBC, and mostly rear end and side sweeping collisions happened. So 2 injury collisions occurred at Miller and Dorman intersection, including 1 pedestrian. While the total number is not catastrophic or is not too many, but it shows that the data confirms that operational issues that we identified previously aligns with the data that we received from RCMP and ICBC. So we go through the recommendations. The good news is that I would like to share this, that, the good news is that these are not big capital projects that we need to do. These are small improvements that make a huge impact. So, basically taking care of the faded crosswalks or making some adjustment into the linings and some of the crosswalk locations, or relocating some of these signs can help us to achieve our impactful goals for being safe in this area. So if you look at this, so basically I have to change some of these slides because we received the recommendations on very late in the evening on Friday. So I worked over weekends to make them readable. So these are the updated. Yes, and these are the updated. So you can, if you look at them, you can see the recommendations are near the ferry terminal. We need to update pavement markings to 2-way lane to clarify how the shared lane operates. So basically, if you look at it from the Cardina Road to the ferry, these shared lines will help people to understand this is a shared road with the opposite traffic. This plus, erecting some of these signs with the 2-lane signs, 2-way lane signs will help the drivers to understand that this road is shared, and they take cautionary when they are doing this, when they are using that road. And also, it is recommended to move the sidewalks and make them standardized. So, yeah.
Can you just orient me? I had myself, where's the ferry terminal on here? This?
No, on your right. On your right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. On your right, and on your left, you are going up. So the Cardina, can you see the Cardina there?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
I was looking at it and then I turned myself around. So thank you very much. Oh, yeah. Okay.
So if you look at the arrow up here, it shows the north.
Okay. There we
Yeah.
go. Thank you.
So basically, most of these recommendations are very simple to implement, not huge cost, but it will help with the clarity. As you can see, most of our signs are outdated. We need to replace them. Some of the dates are new. Some of the signs are going to be new signs, and we are going to put them there. This is related, the proposed recommendation for Cardina Drive and Ferry Terminal. This is very detailed. If you have any questions, please let me know. I don't want to bore you with all these details. Then from Cardina Drive to Mount Gardiner, again, same thing. The crosswalk consistency, we need to use zebra markings for all of them. all of our cross walk sign placements, relocate the sign in a better position, old marking removals. We need to show the playground ahead in our signs and use the BC MOTT accessible parking that is there. It's the paint is faded, it need to be painted, and also trimming vegetation that obstructing the existing signage. There are long-term recommendations that it's not going to go right now to the tender package. These long-term recommendations will need a lot of planning plus communications with the BC Ferry. So basically, we just put it there as some of the recommendations in the report. So again, this is the drawings that you have there and shows we need to just work on our crosswalks. We need to change our sign location, nothing major here. The next one is the Mount Gardner Road, short-term and long-term options. So as you can see, and I'm sure experience, here in Mount Gardner, this line can be very confusing. So, and to be honest, like I myself, I had no idea. I had to ask my staff, like how I can get into the ferry line when the ferry line here is, I don't want to budge, but how does this work? And because it's very confusing, lots of people, they don't know. And it is one of the ways that people are really mad at each other, right? Especially mad at visitors. So basically what we are going to do here, we are going to have two lines, one for the thorough traffic and one for the left turn to go back and join the ferry queuing. A bunch of like this improvement will happen a lot with the ferry queuing, and also changing some of the signs. We need to have the new no right turn sign right there, because it's dangerous for the mop, the people that they are using the mop. So basically they need to use this line rather than using this as a right turn. So, and there are other consideration for future. For example, the consultants were talking about having the roundabout here, or jog handle, or extending the queue line, the ferry queue up here, which again, these are major capital plans that we don't have funds for them. So this is going to be taken into consideration in the future when we have enough funds. But for the time being, with this improvement in the signage and marking on the pavement, we can achieve, the objective for this project. So during this study, what we did, we understood that we don't have a good guideline for signage across the Bowen Island. So this guide establishes a unified framework for road infrastructure on the Bowen Island, ensuring signage is consistent island-wide, that every sign is properly placed and eligible, and the pavement markings follow a clear, recognizable standard. It also addresses a long-standing gap in nighttime visibility. So basically, we are going to address all of that through having a guide, and starting from Snow Cove. So Snow Cove is the most important area for the island, and then from here we will improve the line and marking and signage across the Bowen Island. So looking at the summary and the big picture, again, I would like to emphasize on the fact that this project is about, it's something bigger than signs and paints. It's about making sure everyone is safe out there. And our gateway to the island is not full, works safely and clearly for everyone. So residents should feel comfortable walking around. Drivers should understand exactly where to go. And visitors should be able to navigate the ferry queuing without confusion. So where we go from here? So basically right now, the tender package is ready to go. And I need to report with the consultant on the schedule, and then we put it in the market like this week. So tender and award, we are aiming for 27th of April, 2026 to come back to council for award of the project. But here is the interesting part. We do have two options for construction. So option number one is starting June 1st, because May is not a good time to start this project. It's wet and we don't have like the painting and everything is very dry. At least 3 to 5 days dry weather. So June, either we start June 1st and it will extend it to the tourist time and the very busy time, or we wait until after Labor Day, starting the project September 8th. So I'd like to know your idea and your opinion about it. Which one you think works better for the islanders and for the business? So I basically don't want to interrupt the businesses out there that they are waiting for the tourists and for the tourists to come and they flourish their business and everything. On the other hand, yeah.
Sorry, to the chair, what's the expected timeframe from start to complete for the construction?
Through the chair. So basically, the consultant estimated between 1.5 months to 2 months. However, what I'm thinking, with mobilization, demob, it's going to extend
it's
more.
3 months. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
So this is then with that, I'm ready to answer any questions.
Councillor Wade.
Through the chair, I'm a little uncertain about the Mount Gardner intersection by the school. One of the things that was noted is if you're coming up to get into the ferry line, that's where you do your U-turn. But if you come across there, if the ferry lineup is already back to that spot, you can't get into so is there a solution for that, or?
To the chair, this is a very good question, and we do know this problem. Unfortunately, the only way to get around it is around having either a jog handling or roundabout, which right now it's a big investment. Yeah. So we have a very limited budget of $150,000 to $200,000 if we stretch it and get more money from ICBC and to get funding from here and there. But with $200,000, you know that we cannot build a roundabout.
So I suppose one option in the interim would be to go up to Artisan Square, turn in and go around there, traffic circle just part way up, come back. I mean, that doesn't happen for a long period of time because pretty soon that's all filled up, but.
So it's gonna take 1.5 to 2 months to do it, and how much is it gonna cost?
So what we asked from the consultant to put all the line items, all the recommendations here in the bid as line items. And when we receive the bid, I don't know 100% how much it's gonna cost right now. They couldn't tell me either. So we have some budget, we put some budget aside, and also we have some grants and we are gonna apply for grants from ICBC. So with that tender package, we'll first of all report to the council that how much is that tender package. Then we'll go to these different entities that they are gonna fund this project, plus to Mrs. Watson, and see how much we have. Then we can decide which line item can be awarded, which line item needs to be put off for later.
You're gonna prioritize before you go out for the bid?
It like basically, I want to like, it was recommended to do all these recommendations, right? So we put all these line items out there and see how much it's gonna cost us. And one good thing about the full package is that we will attract more people to look into the package when we have more line items and a project seems bigger than just a lane paint, right? So hopefully we attract more bidders and we get competitive pricing. Plus, we can take this package with the numbers to different entities that they are gonna fund us and get more funding.
How much, I guess, do you have in hand now?
So through the chair, in the capital plan, I think person.
Thank you. Through the chair, there's 160,000 in the TransLink OMR, it's operations maintenance network. That's all used on the regional network road, so it's eligible. And then we'll also get another, I think, 60,000 this year. So we do have almost 210 eligible funding of our own money that we could use.
And have we got any secured grants already?
No.
But the ICBC right now is involved with this recommendations and with this project, and they promise that they are going to grant part of the signage and improvements to their program. But the amount is not clear right now. They are waiting for our tender package numbers.
I guess my other follow-up question to that was that if we have secured grants, what was the timing to get the job done to keep the grant? So there's nothing wrong with the OMR. So it's just a matter of an ICBC at this point, it would be.
Yes.
I'm still having a lot of trouble understanding the map because it doesn't very clearly show the sidewalk. The 2 lanes off up to, and then the one merging in one, and then the lane down, the ferry marshalling lanes and the parking on the other side. So in looking at the map on this Miller Road down. The one that got Miller Road to the crosswalk that we are looking at. Hard to figure out from the other side of the road. So there's no parking at all from corner to the crosswalk, which I think is the situation now with the hash marks. So there is some parking on the road. But the hatch marks are also where the ferry marshalling line is, and I guess that's the issue. It's not clearly shown. So when I thought further down between Miller and that's this bit. So between Miller and I guess it's the middle of the code block, I guess, where the crosswalk is. And he talked about
Well, let's just wait and make sure we're all on the same page.
it looks like that.
So it's line number 04.
Do you have any numbers?
Yes, here on the block. Usually there. Here. 2.
I'm guessing that's the crosswalk where the blue used to be. But, and then the through lane, but it doesn't show the ferry marshalling lane.
Yes, that's.
No, that's the through lane, because there's your 2 lanes off and that's the through lane going down to the ferry.
There's 5 lanes on that.
Yeah, there's two lanes coming off, one lane going through all the way down. And one and two other on the side, which one is a parking lane and one is the ferry marshalling lane.
Okay.
So where's ferry marshalling lane?
For the side part.
So,
And there's no drawing there. There's no line there. There's no line running through this. Are they intending
Okay,
to get rid of the, do they think the through like getting rid of the front or the ferry marshalling? I don't know. I just.
So maybe you look into the detail.
There should be a line.
okay, let's try and
I'm
organize.
just
the
having real trouble
conversation.
understanding.
All right,
that.
so-
About it.
Let's.
Yeah,
probably
and then
I think it's coming up on the screen.
and then somewhere. What's a zebra crosswalk?
It's just the,
Straight
through
line?
the chair, it's just a straight line, the typical one you see.
Oh, okay. So it's complete with zebra crosswalk markings, which, yeah. Remove the crosswalk.
This is the production product there.
Okay, so that's better. It does say. Very,
So this is a future, what they said. There are options for that. I'm gonna go to the appendix. And this is the current situation in
We have an
there.
expansion of 205.
205.
Let me go to the drawing.
These were all done back in the 5th of December, so maybe there's been updated maps. These ones we've got the enlargement, so.
Okay, the enlargements, yes. I'm gonna stop sharing and bring the new drawings up. But that might be a mistake in the drawings that we received it on Friday evening. I have to double. Let me look at the drawings.
All right, can I?
Just needs one there.
Yes.
But that's.
Councilor Saunders, your hand is up.
thank you through the chair. I just have one question for you, and you may not know the answer, and just a couple of comments. The question was essentially that 0205 and 0105. Are we eliminating any of the ferry spots? Or they're gonna be the same now? Okay, that's what it looked like to me. I just wasn't sure.
It was the answer. I'm sorry, I was looking down. We are not eliminating any. Thank you.
And then two things, and I don't know if these count as suggestions or not. One is, I would love to see where on 105 at far right where the pedestrian traffic gets off and some will go there and some go there. I would love to see a sign there that says, "Get the hell off the road." I'm serious. Like if we have people standing there taking pictures, the ferry people aren't gonna do anything about it. They rarely will. So if we had something saying, "Get off the road, there's traffic, you're gonna get run over," something on those lines, if we could get the consultant to add that in there, would be useful. I'm also very cognizant of the fact that although we're drawing lines there up at the Mount Gardner turnoff to do left turns to get in the lane, there's all kinds of U-turns go on all over the place, and maybe the odd no U-turn sign. would be
We do
useful.
have, yes.
Oh, were you? Okay,
We
I
have-
couldn't see them, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I just didn't see them. That's great, thank you.
Even though you turn on other people, it's
That's what you said.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Jurgensen.
Thank you through the chair. Sorry, I do have 4 questions, and they are all pertaining to accessibility and signage in the Cove, but I do apologize without having access to this map. it is a little frustrating for me trying to figure out where exactly we're talking about. So if I start talking about an area that's outside the boundaries of this, please forgive me in advance. But one of the first question I have is just regarding, because there's a lot of talk here about crosswalk, repainting of all the crosswalks. Just wanted to confirm this is not the same kind of project where the tactile markings at the ends of the crosswalks will be put in. Is that outside the scope of this project? And that's, left for another accessibility project down the road. Just asking because it's in the accessibility plan. So I'm just trying to figure out whether that's kind of part of the scope of this project or we're looking at something different for that.
Through the chair, this is a very good question, Councillor. Yes, we are taking into consideration, and it was part of the tender package that this is the crosswalks are accessible to everyone, and we will have the tactiles. It
Okay,
was part of, yes.
Thank you. The second one is something else that came up in our accessibility plan was looking at, when developing the accessibility plan, was looking at accessible signage, which includes, both things like Braille and QR codes, which, QR codes don't just help persons with disabilities, they help anybody who needs to translate the sign into another language easily and effectively. But just wondering if that was also considered within the scope of this project?
Through the chair, unfortunately not. This was not part of the scope of this project, but what we can do, we can have a discussion because this is not the end of it. We will continue improving this project and improving this law code. And this is a great point that you mentioned, and we will consider it in the future improvement.
Understood. The only reason I'm asking about it now is because typically just the way accessibility works, including it at the earlier stage would be much more cost effective. So I'm just concerned that later down the road, if we try to do it, then they would be like, well, the cost is just so much higher to replace some of the sign metal itself. That was my only, kind of reason for bringing that up now. But the third question I have is just regarding, and I'm currently in the middle of, for myself and my own understanding, there is 7 signs pertaining to matters specifically about accessibility along the stretch of road that we're talking about. Now, sometimes they disappear. In the past, there has been historically, when they get taken down for maintenance, they sometimes don't either make it back or don't make it back in the same spot. So I'm currently trying to identify where those 7 currently sit along that corridor. But are they identified on your map at all for replacement? Or is that something that hasn't been considered yet?
Through the chair, no, it was not part of the scope of project, and we are not going to replace any accessibility signage. However, we are repainting accessible parking spots that they were painted.
Okay. And so, yeah, no, and I understand, based on your answer to your last comment, that there's going to be other projects to continue improving Snug Cove, and that's totally okay. I just was, you had mentioned that there was some signs being replaced, some signs being added, some signs being taken away, and that's where I just wanted to kind of, since I don't have the map, I do apologize for having to ask the question as to whether those were up for replacement or not.
Through the chair, I will send these drawings to you directly because these drawings were received very late on Friday evening. And yes, please. Yeah, I will send these to you directly and we can have a conversation about the signage, and if there are signages that you would like to not to remove or relocate it. I don't think that any of the accessibility signage are going to be removed, but I'd like for you to review and give me feedback, please.
Okay. Unfortunately, because it is a diagram, and that's been kind of my challenge with this whole project, especially with it coming in on Friday like it did. And I do really appreciate you working through the weekend to get it, get it for us. And so this is not a reflection on you at all. But it just a simple logistical fact that I actually can't make much use out of the drawings. Because I can't see on the drawing where the signs that are being, well, where any of the signs on the drawing really are. Would it be possible to sit down and maybe have a conversation about where some of these are so I have a better understanding of where all those and kind of with the scope of this project? Because I'm, to be honest, kind of feeling a little uncomfortable with voting on something without having all the information. But I do, appreciate that we need to get this project moved forward as well. So I'm happy to support it, but would love the opportunity to sit down and kind of be able to go over the material if you or one of your staff has time for that as an accessibility accommodation, if you don't mind me asking. And that was my fourth question and final question.
Through the chair.
So if I could just
Go
respond,
ahead.
please. Thank you, Councillor Jurgensen, for your points there. I just want to reiterate though, this was a very narrow scope of work. The genesis of how this project came forward is that we had faded markings that were there for the traffic. And so part of the exercise was to do expensive thermoplastic markings, which are highly visible, and they're recessed above, they actually sit above the pavement, so they're a little bit more visible. That's costly and expensive. And once you do them, you can't undo them easily. You expend more costs. So the purpose of the study is we got funding from ICBC to actually look at the lane marking and the signage configuration to see if it conforms to the MUTCD, which is the Manual and Uniform Traffic Control Devices. It's the Canadian federal standard for these types of things, so that when we did place the markings down, they wouldn't have to be removed later, or they would be questioned by somebody to say they don't conform to what the standards are nationally. So that was the purpose of this. At the time, we didn't have any, when we started this quite a while ago, before the accessibility plan was actually completed. So some of the points you're bringing now, we're not saying they're not valid, they're very valid points in the context of accessibility, but the scope of this project was very limited on just redefining the lines better so that we don't have to redo thermoplastics a year after we place them, and also to provide more direction to the vehicle traffic that's using the ferry queuing lanes and unloading. So we can try and incorporate some of those aspects into this work, but it wasn't the primary focus at the time that the study was commissioned. Does that help?
That definitely does help to understand the context. And same with my comments. Like I understand that these came, the points in the accessibility plan did certainly come afterwards, and definitely happy to see them in a future phase as well if they're not done now. But your piece there does definitely help me to better contextualize what the work is currently being done. Especially again, without that map, I can't tell exactly what we're talking about. I got the line markings, but then we started talking about signs and, future roundabouts, different things like that. And that's where I just started feeling a little bit like I was out of my depth without the diagrams. So thank you very much, CEO Dylan, for that. I appreciate that context.
Councillor Fast.
Thank you for this. This is now that I'm oriented and have flipped it inside my head again. It looks really interesting to me. I'm happy to see traffic calming devices and things like that. I have a question and then a comment. I'm looking at drawing 05 of 05, the one about the Mount Junction. And I just want to check that I don't see a mention, maybe it's there, but I don't see a mention of the school buses that usually park up there. Were they taken into consideration?
To the chair, that's a very good question. Yes, the school buses were taken into consideration and we had a site visit. So basically the school are dropping the kids off, if we go to the drawings here, so right in front of the school, they are not supposed to leave the buses here. They do it now, and this is gonna be an instruction for the school that you cannot leave the buses here. The buses, they do have location down there on the street. So basically, it was lack of communications and lane marking, they use that as a parking lot for the buses. Yeah, so
Thank
they are
you.
gonna just drop off and then move down.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Okay, that's helpful clarification. And that's great, because when that whole subdivision was put in up there, the whole idea of how would kids move to the school and where would the crosswalk be, all of that, I was on one of the committees that was trying to deal with that after the fact. So this is good that you're thinking about the school buses and the kids ahead of time. And just on your question for input about the timing, I know that there was a push to get this ready for this summer, but I remember, almost 10 years ago now, there was a quickly emerging project to build what was called a silt trap or a grease trap or something down in front of what is now Tippy's restaurant. And so suddenly all those businesses along that side had closures and big equipment noisy. And I went down and talked to them, and they were startled and horrified. They were going, well, that's a week and a half of revenue in the summer. I need that. So that's part of my reason for thinking if we're going to do it this summer, then I think we need to consult the businesses that are down there that could be affected. But also, I like the idea of waiting till the fall because it'd be drier, and this big investment could have a better chance of success. Because for me, the tourist season starts well before the May long weekend. So I don't know. That's my thinking currently. No, she did ask for input about which preference. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions? I have one on the map 505. Right almost dead in the middle, there's a little tiny red oval. It looks like a car maybe. And the line that goes off to that to the side is a no right turn sign and object marker sign with traffic calming curb. So that is, if you see the stairs coming up from the school and then the pathway across in front of where the buses are parked, and then the zebra stripe crosswalk. What is that little oval? Okay, no right turn. Where is that right turn?
Yeah,
That's it.
through the chair, apparently, some of the traffics that are going through the main Boyne Island trunk road, they do, instead of going thorough to the right and make the right turn, they do the right turn in the middle of that trunk road, which has been observed. Now we are going to put that no right turn right there. So there is right now, there is no right turn. There is no sign for people to show that you cannot do the right turn here.
So instead of veering off to the right, people go a little farther and turn.
Yes.
Okay.
When it's busy, when people are waiting for the ferry queue, they just do this and go into the right turn, which is dangerous. Now we are going to erect that sign there.
Right. Any other questions?
One.
I do.
Sorry.
I'm not sure if it's on 505 or 405, but where's the crosswalk that's right now, that's there right now with this, that you push the button and it stops the traffic? It's more right out here. I don't see it on the unless it's the one that says eradicate old crosswalk marking.
Through the chair, are you talking about the crosswalk in front of the community center?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's here. It's on 04 out of 05.
But it says eradicate old crosswalk markings and extend Potchap to yellow lines up to existing zebra crosswalk. Oh, little arrow, yeah, read that.
Yeah, but that's where
Changing
extend
the
crosswalk.
eradicate.
If you take out the crosswalk markings.
You're not taking out the cross.
Everybody's having difficulty understanding, so I'm not sure if it's the maps or if it's the
Just,
late action or.
I think the,
Counselor Wood.
sorry, if I may, Chair, I think that the purpose of this session was to present this at a high level, like there's been engineering work that's gone into it. We're not eradicating crosswalks, can assure any, assure people of that, and I think classically, some presentation of this detail would come to the Transportation Committee. We no longer have that committee, so the thinking of council is now we're gonna start seeing some of these things show up at committee of the whole, so if you have specific questions, we're more than happy to field them offline or provide more information or clarification, but we're not eradicating any crosswalks, and it's not a design input session. It's more of a presentation, get general feedback on the concepts, and there was a direct ask about preference for time of years.
Counselor Wade.
Just a quick question about the fading of the paint. Do we know how many years it takes? 'Cause it almost seems like it needs to be redone every year or at least every 2 years. So I just wondered, is that in the plan?
Through the chair, that's a very good question, and that's why the CEO mentioned thermoplastic. So in some areas, we are gonna have thermoplastic for longer term solution, high visibility and longer term solutions, but the rest of them, every couple of years, we do have the budget in our operating budget to repaint them.
Thank you.
All right, Counselor Jurgensen, second time question, I think we need to wrap it up.
Okay, thank you. My question is just about down at the bottom where it's where people are coming off the ferry. So the ferry that you unload on as you're walking off on the left-hand side of that ramp. My observation is a lot of people immediately cross over to the other side and walk up alongside where the mural is painted. And honestly, this is my own ignorance, but is there currently a crosswalk there, or is there plans as part of this project to put one there that goes kind of across to where the dock is there, or is that something that we're trying to discourage, that kind of behavior of going across the road?
Through the chair, there is no crosswalk right there, and you are right, we don't want to encourage people to do that. So basically, there is no crosswalk, and there is nothing in the plan to do it as a scope of this work.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. And appreciate all the work that you've done on this. It looks excellent. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, so the only question that's being asked of us is whether or not we've got a preference for June or September. Right? Counselor Wade?
With respect to Councillor Fast's comments, I'm not sure that September, October is drier than June necessarily. I don't know, Bill, am I missing something?
Well, let's.
I think the engineers.
I think, sorry, through the chair, I think it would be useful if the Director of Engineering and Public Works kind of laid out how this work is to be phased, because I don't think the thermoplastics are all gonna occur on the same day. I don't think the painting is gonna include on, it's not like I don't envision us shutting down a road for a week on end. I think it's phased work and it will happen in the evenings, but I think that would be helpful for council to maybe talk about that.
Through the chair, thank you, CEO. So basically, that was the comment from the consultant that with what they are seeing out there. After September, still we do have good weather to do the thermoplastic, to do the painting. And also after Labor Day, it's easier to do some of these changes for the blocks and concrete work that is needed for the crosswalks. Rather than doing it through the June. Of course, we do have a better weather and it's drier, but we will make sure that most of the painting and most of the thermoplastic is going to be phased at the beginning, like let's say right after the Labor Day. And the other work that can be done later, even in wet season, we can just bridge it that time, like phase it for later. I myself, I looked into, looking at smaller stretch of the area and bringing construction crews there and making that area busy. I'm not in favor of doing that project at that time. I'm in favor of waiting just because for the sake of all these businesses that they are waiting for this season. They are waiting for summer to have the visitors to be there and do make business, right? So, but I just wanted to let the committee of the whole know that we do have the options to get this done earlier.
All right, so what's everybody's preference? June would be really fast. Turnaround. And we've got some financial steps to take, it sounds like. Details in terms of what funding is going to be available and whether or not there's extra ICBC and whether or not we're going to have a line by line RFP. That's going to take some time.
Everything is ready. The line by line is ready to go. Like tomorrow, I can put it in the market. Everything is ready to go. We don't have any problem on our end. So basically, we can tender it tomorrow, and by 27th, we can bring it to the council for award.
All right. So, what's your pleasure, Councillor Wink?
I would like to follow the director's recommendation and do it after Labor Day.
Me too.
So I'll make that motion if that's what.
As would I.
Okay, Councillor Morris?
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, this is the middle of, close to the end of March, and I'm guessing that a lot of these people that do these jobs have probably may have already been responding to tenders and booked for June. So they've got a better chance of getting more interest if we go for September.
All right. I didn't realize there was a recommendation attached to this, but so I think the general consensus that we can do a straw vote in terms of setting it up for September. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Kind of a get it done guy, in spite of that. But that's fine, like, I'm happy to be outvoted on this. It's not an issue.
There's your straw
Bring it
vote
for a year.
parts of September.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Eric.
Thanks for this. This is great.
I'm finding the map very busy and very difficult, so if you're sitting down with Alex, I wouldn't mind joining. Okay, all right, so then next on the agenda, last is the strategic initiative check-in. Daniel Village.
Thank you, Chair. The updated table is there for council's review. I'll just do a brief overview of the highlights. So on housing, on lot 1 community lands, we have an agreement to lease is in place with Birch, and they're working on with a professional to prepare the detailed plan. On the Housing Accelerator Fund, the year-end grant report was due March 1st. We got that in. Work is on track with the housing action plan items. though we're unlikely to meet housing permit targets just with the downtrend in the market. Recreation and culture, we have an age-friendly communities grant application underway with Sky, the Bowen Island Community Health Center, and the Men's Shed to update the age-friendly action plan aligned with existing work on needs. In land use planning, we have the draft OCP is being reviewed by the OCP steering committee, and we're leading to phase 2 of public engagement later this spring. In terms of transportation, we're working on revenue recovery through fees from BC Ferries. We have some options presented to us from Lidstone, so we're reviewing those and working on a report to bring that forward to council. We do not yet have any confirmation of funding from BC Ferries for ferry marshalling this year. They provided 1,000 last year. We have not secured a funding agreement yet. We're working on a plan for systematic data collection on ferry traffic and congestion in terms of our payment management and the amount of traffic that comes on the island to have some equipment in place for that. We just received the presentation on the updated lane markings and signage. So based on what we can do, if we can get it done sooner, we will, but thanks for giving us the option of going later if we need to. We have a ferry camera. It's installed now. It's working. It's apparently got 3,000 hits in the first week, maybe even more than that. So it's very popular. On revenue, we had the MRDT bylaw has received first reading and is now being sent out to regional governments, Destination BC for approval. On the wastewater DCCs, the next step would be to engage with the development community, and we're working with Urban Systems to restart the project after some staff availability issues from Urban Systems. They had some people who are not around right now. In terms of asset management, for the asset report cards, we have the culvert assessments are complete and being transferred into the asset management software. Road condition assessment starts in March. And that's going to be a full scan of the roads with some photos and a whole bunch of geospatial information. It's going to be great. We're working on the water main report card, which will be included through the island-wide master plan. And we're working on the big asset management RFP as well. Next steps on several items are dependent on the 2026 budget approval. So that includes the asset management RFP, capital replacement plans, and water master plan RFP.
Going back just up to you said water main report card will be included in the island-wide master plan. Is that the island-wide water plan? Is that the same thing?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Great,
That's what
thank you.
And then on the solid waste strategy, we have an outline that's drafted, and we're meeting with Recycle BC to explore partnership opportunities. In terms of municipal utility systems, for the Cove Bay Water Treatment Plant, commissioning continues and troubleshooting is underway with various engineering options to improve what we have. We've retained HDR consultants, and we're collaborating with them on intake flush design and construction. The operators have procured equipment to implement learnings from their trip to London, Ontario to undergo the Purifix training. So we sent a first cohort was in January, I believe. Second cohort just finished, and they're back from London, Ontario. So all 4 of our operators now have received in-depth training in London, Ontario. Other utilities projects are in progress. Eagle Cliff to Cove Bay connection is pretty close to being done. I think it's about 75% around there. And the Snug Cove sewer outfall replacement It's just awaiting some permitting to do the archaeological work. The infiltration and inflow study for Snug Cove wastewater collection system was completed and generally shows that we're not too bad on that front. And we're also registering our facilities through the municipal wastewater regulations. So staff are preparing an RFP for a gap analysis to see what additional requirements of the ministry we need to fulfill and how to do those, meet those requirements. Almost getting through the items here. Operation capacity on the operations center concept. We are drafting an RFP for an owner's representative, and we'll be issuing that once we have the budget approval. For the workflow maintenance and management system of our asset management program, the maintenance module is purchased and implementation is underway across all roads, utilities, and parks, asset classes. There's weekly meetings. Staff are getting up to speed on implementing that system, and it should be pretty useful for the public because they'll get to directly input on our work, the work we do every day. In terms of reconciliation, we have some work that's underway with a local group who's keen on putting a welcome figure at the community center. We're still working out how to roll that out in terms of our various art policies that we have, but hopefully hoping to bring something to council on what's being envisioned. It seems really exciting and promising, and there's been numerous articles on it in the undercurrent. In terms of the interpretive signage for Indigenous place names, we're just waiting for final approval from the BC Geographic Names Office and expected to roll that out in April. On the leadership development front and inclusion, in terms of we've have new and returning members that have been appointed to the Accessibility Advisory Committee. The first meeting was on March 5th, and we're moving forward into implementation and trying to find grant funding to implement all those items that are in the plan. I delivered a workshop on report writing and presentations on the same day as our International Women's Day event. So a lot of good tips and tricks were given to council, or sorry, not council, our staff, and hopefully those get implemented. The leadership development for our current and emerging leaders is going to proceed with its first course, and that's going to be on providing constructive feedback. So that's being planned. On communications, we have a communication strategy that's going to be giving people kind of an insight into what our people do out in the field. So a series of videos that talk about what each person does, little vignettes, and also some videos highlighting this facility for marketing purposes. So we'll be working on that pending budget approval. On policy modernization, we've developed a framework for policies, and these policy updates have been assigned to staff to work on to bring forward to council, as well as a bunch of directives that have been put in place. So we have a directive now on how we handle a temporary closure of municipal hall, for example. So a bunch of directives are coming forward, and we're also undergoing corporate procurement training in April the 21st. We booked that through the procurement school. It's going to be a day-long workshop to get all staff kind of on the same page on procurement so that they understand, the different methods and risks involved with that. In terms of land conservation on the rezoning of municipal parks, PCAC supported the proposed rezoning at their February 4th meeting, and staff are preparing a council report and amendment bylaw for council's reconsideration. Watershed management plan contract has been awarded, and background materials have been provided to the consultant Urban Systems, and the desktop assessment is underway. We are looking at a septic maintenance bylaw, which is the background research is being done by planning to advance that. And a report should be coming to council on advancing that bylaw. And then finally, we delivered a free builders workshop at the community center theater that was attended by 40 industry professionals and focused on optimizing permitting, costs, energy performance, and resilience in the STEP code environment. So that is a snapshot of strategic initiatives. Any questions?
Councillor Wood?
On the develop a septic maintenance bylaw, is it included in that to look at type 3 and type 4 treatment on multifamily projects?
It's through the chair, it's a precursor step on the way to doing that. So for us to get to that, we need the septic maintenance bylaw first for us to move on to broader implementation of those types of assistance.
Councillor Fowles?
Just regarding number 1 on the land conservation, bit about Squamish Nation Collaborative Land Use Planning. I just wanted to flag that on the agenda for this Howe Sound Community Forum, April 17th, provincial representatives and Squamish Nation are coming to talk about their land use agreement. So I just wanted to flag that for everybody.
Councillor Morris?
I'm noticing that the CFO seems to have a heavy load on sort of the transportation related things to do with ferry marshalling and down there and given all the other work she has to do, can you find somebody else to do that?
Through the chair, and I'll invite the CFO to jump in if she so chooses to on this one, but a lot of those things looked at specific types of bylaws and permitting mechanisms, which would be housed under the bylaw services. So it's really consulting with the lawyers a lot on this. So that's why they're with the CFO's area, because bylaw services reports to the CFO. But does our CFO have any ideas? I don't put you on the spot with this one, but
It's possible too, if the strategic initiatives officer position is approved, then that's something that potentially could be housed there as well, because it certainly is a tenet of council's strategic plan for this year to improve ferry marshalling and the experience for users in the home.
yeah, and I just want to further add to that is that just because there is a name beside it doesn't mean we're working in silos. We all help each other. And one example is just on the ferry camera that went up through our meetings at the senior leadership table. Aaron Hannon, our fire chief, actually helped through his contracting background to facilitate some of that work. So we work closely together. Just because your name's beside it doesn't mean you're the only one who's going to be working on it. We try and help each other out.
The other question had to do with, I'm confused about working or partnering with Recycling BC.
I'm going to defer that one to our Director of Engineering and Public Works.
Through the chair. The conversation happened when we started looking at our contract with Bowen Waste, and this needs to be kind of put in the market for this year, end of this year, the beginning of next year. We need to put an RFP for the Bowen Waste. So right now, Bowen Island Municipality is not a partner with Recycle BC. And what is the advantage of being part of Recycle BC is that they will pay the collectors, the municipality, based on tonnage of all the materials that we produce, plus they pay for the transportation. However, there were some, problems with using the contractors and drivers of Boyne Waste previously, because basically Recycle BC had their own drivers and contractors to do the transportation. We had a conversation with Recycle BC, and they mentioned that they are changing their model and they can hire the drivers who are right now working for Boyne Waste. So basically, they're gonna pay them for transferring all the materials that we are producing, plus they are gonna pay based on the tonnage of the collected material to the Boyne Island, and then we can have that, side contract with Boyne Waste. So to summarize it, so far we've never partnered with Recycle BC because they never let us to use our own drivers, the Boyne Waste drivers. Now that the opportunity is there, we are having this conversation with Recycle BC to see how we can strategize it. So it's gonna be, and we are hopeful that we can have some saving through Recycle BC by, first of all, being paid for the transportation of the material, and second, for the tonnage of the material that we are collecting.
Okay. And will we be able to recycle as much as we already recycle?
To the chair, yes, and if the tonnage goes up, we are gonna produce, like, the revenue is higher. So they don't care how much we produce, they pay based on the tonnage.
I meant, in looking at their website, there's some things that we take to recycling now that they don't take. I think. So,
So.
To the
in
chair.
Process of starting this conversation, and we're gonna get more reports on it.
Yes, that's correct. However, whatever is not paid by Recycle BC, it's gonna be handled by Boyne Waste. So we are not gonna lose the ability to recycle everything, but Recycle BC is gonna pay for part of the recycles for the residential, especially for residential cardboards, residential packaging. Anything related to the residential packaging is to be paid by Recycle BC.
I have questions about recreation and culture. So there's no mention of youth, and I'm wondering what's happening with that. We've got a very active seniors group, but I'm not sure if anybody's picking up on youth programs. And this review and update of core funding agreements for arts and cultural organizations. It says it hasn't started, but I think we've got a deadline on that, do we not?
Through the chair, with specific to youth, the operations budget does include a $40,000 expenditure to engage a contractor to develop a plan for youth services on the island. So we've got that piece covered off in the operations budget. We're working through the core funding agreements one by one. We've just recently started with the Museum and Archives, and we'll continue to work through those with the other community organizations.
That's probably.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair, we haven't started everything.
Yeah. Any other questions? Great. So, what's left is question period. So I don't see anybody from the community still in the community. We lost our last member just a moment ago. And nobody online. So, but if there is anybody, it's question periods, an opportunity for members of the public to request clarification or ask a follow-up question relating to an item discussed at the meeting. Questions must relate to an item on the agenda. Questions must be directed to the acting mayor. Questions are limited to questions per speaker, must not exceed 3 minutes in total. Any questions? Good. All right. Welcome to adjourn. Seconded by Councilor Wade. All those in favor? Aye.